Dear black man, how you feeling? You alright? More than likely, your thoughts and ideas about yourself are shaped by the images looped on mainstream and social media. Have you ever wondered why grotesque images of slain members of your community circulate at the frequency they do, looped over and over and over? It's because there's no better way to shape your reality for you. And why would anyone attempt to shape your reality, I hear you ask? Well, philosophy has birthed politics, and politicians seek to maintain power. And since we know that essentially they work for you, what better way to remain relevant if they convince you that you need them? It's 2020, and it's about time you asked yourself, who benefits from this guy's limited perception of himself? Watch this clip.
I believe that you have more opportunities than I do.
Just ballpark. It's more than likely the political agent who's going to assume themselves as his savior. Still guessing? Use your brain. Or ask your homie Booker T. Washington.
There is a class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs.
Those words make sense to me. But maybe you need to hear it from the mouth of LeBron James, who millions of little black boys seem to idolize because he can shoot balls. He has no intellectual gravity, and yet his endorsements matter. Now let's assess for the moment the actor-beneficiary relationship. There are only two parties who serve as vehicles, where people group their ideological affiliations onto tickets, electorally speaking. Red or blue? Which side panders to the grievances of minorities? And which side stands around like a boyfriend who doesn't know what he did? I'm not a rocket scientist, but it seems like there's a beneficiary of the black man's low self-image. It's the party who perpetuates stories about disparities. It's the party that spouts statistics while they contradict the laws of elementary statistics. What you can't dispute is that appealing to minorities and promising to eradicate all evil everywhere isn't on the red team's agenda. Their suggestions for the future of the country don't veer far from cutting benefits across the board, job creation. Now this is seen as evil and inhumane, yet it forces a polis to pull themselves up. Who benefits from that? You, the minority, not the Republican. Republican politics force you to be dependent on yourself. They could care less about the obstacles in your way. No matter how dysfunctional your family, no matter how many syringes you have to step over, no matter how much gang violence you have to try to avoid, no matter that pregnancy that disrupted your life's plan because you had a moment of weakness, you're human. All of those things, to the Republican, are hard. But that doesn't mean your middle-class dream is impossible to attain. You might not believe it when a white person tells you. So just ask the Jewish, Chinese, Lebanese, Nigerian Americans, all communities of color who debunk the lie that minorities can't get ahead because white people have all the privilege. You will always be the beneficiary if you're being forced to sink or swim. You're being forced to find resilience through adversity. Now your response to that might border on the fact that the resources in your community are ebbing. Schools are oversaturated. This is where the first lesson of economics comes in. You ready for it? Scarcity. It's a universal truth that resources are finite. There is not enough of everything to satisfy every human being. Now, if you're smarter than a fifth grader, that should tell you that Mother Nature discriminates on the scale that mankind couldn't even attempt to keep up with. So let's address the default argument, that is to say that there aren't enough necessities to go around. White men have showed themselves favor. They give each other rope. They keep wealth within their communities only. They have privilege. Duh. What you're describing is called nepotism. Ever heard of it? Every tribe grouped by sexual orientation, fraternity or sorority chapters, religion, they all take care of their own. So if you'd like to build a case against nepotism, what would you supplant it with? Is it meritocracy? Interestingly enough, if you are black and you were raised in a predominantly black neighborhood, your county officials, your state officials, they all believe the disparities narrative. And guess what they did in response to that? They lowered the academic hoop for you. Since the response to the disparities allegory was to lower the academic hoop for you, this means that you weren't really held accountable for demonstrating punctuality, math, English skills. You weren't put in a position to compete with other races because of your social circumstances. So will merit-based opportunities hurt or help you? The jury is still out because the illiteracy rates are in, and what gives? I'm not saying that the response of lowering the academic hoop for you is your fault. Schools are overburdened because they not only have the responsibility to teach, they have to counsel, they have to feed children. Money is tight, and you can't control that. Or can you? Remember that scarcity rule? If you hold that in your heart as a universal truth, you have two responsibilities. The first is to find out where your money is being allocated. The second is to become an economic conservative. Conserve your money. Become a libertarian. Libertarians are dope. Dear black man, because your reality is shaped for you, you've been wired to vote altruistically instead of voting like a king. When raising the question of how might hundreds of thousands of welfare-dependent people might possibly negatively impact you, you can't form that question because it's racist and mean. My friend, your tongue is oppressed. Black kings, it's time to wake up. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. Not at all. Social misfortunes and tragedies in the hood are not the result of Geppetto, the evil white man, pulling all the strings. It's just not. Now you can eat the lies like groceries if you want to. And God only knows Democrats appreciate it. Democrats hope that you don't spend your time and energy hunting down black economists from Harvard University who math for a living. These are the only living people who can teach you how to interpret statistics yourself. You don't have to worry about it coming from a Democratic plantation or a Republican one. Democrats hope you never realize that your black skin is enough to get you into an Ivy League school where they've lowered the test scores for you, where they accept you just on behalf of your skin color alone. Of course they'd lower the academic hoops for us. We've got too many unique circumstances as black people to study. We can't even remember to bring our IDs to the voting booth. Why would anyone hold us to expectations? Expectations are racist. Democrats hope you never realize that affirmative action practices make it so that as a black person, you've got an easier trajectory to a middle-class lifestyle. Don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean that you're not oppressed. Communities have tons of privilege over you. For instance, every day you learn that you can't question why minorities get to skip the path to citizenship. Meanwhile, if you skip a court date, You're placed in handcuffs. Yeah, that's privilege. Queer communities show you in countless ways that if you say or do anything they may find offensive, you're canceled. Yeah, that's privilege. I'd say so. As a straight man, if you're sexually assaulted by a member of the queer community and happen to defend yourself, that's called a hate crime. Check mark for privilege. If you ever fall in love with a woman, attempt to make love to her, close your eyes, and find that that woman has a penis, you would have learned that it's not a requirement, nor is it socially acceptable or required for you to consent to queer sex. Despite how violated or deceived you may feel, your consent doesn't matter. Sounds like somebody's got privilege over you. Guilty when accused is now normative, which in essence means that you're under the oppressive heel of women everywhere. For any reason, if a woman decides to kill the seed you put into her womb space, if it turns out to be inconvenient for her, you don't have a fucking say. You don't have a choice. It's a woman's prerogative. This, from nature's perspective, is a superior role. We decide who gets to further their gene pools. We control the survival of the species. Do you smell that privilege? Kings, you are oppressed. You're so oppressed that it might have escaped your notice that the oppressed groups that you're temporarily allied with are the ones with their boots on your face. Hope you like feet. Here's the truth. Your opinions, your black skin, your macho alpha masculinity, they're all appreciated on the right. You may not have all the same social interests, but if you want to do for yourself what the Jews, the Chinese, the Lebanese, the Nigerians have all done for their communities, you've only got one choice this election cycle. Otherwise, you're going to be in a socialist hell. Limited speech, your ebbing ability to consent to sex, and the fact that you'll soon be paying for the free lifestyles of communities who've historically kept their borders closed to you. Booker T. Washington said it best, and with that knowledge, you have one responsibility. Choose whether or not you want to die via 1 million paper cuts or going straight to the guillotine. Your choice. You should be voting Democrat if your intentions are to sabotage this country's voyage and go down with the ship while you're at it. It's time you become insulted when someone sells you a free lunch. When they dangle reparations in front of your face knowing you won't receive any. Get angry when in order to sell you socialist magical utopia thinking, they have to bring up your ancestors' trauma. They can't sell you on terrible ideas unless you are emotionally manipulated. I started with this question, and I'll end with it too. Who benefits from the black man's limited perception of himself? You don't have to vote Republican. Stop voting Democrat.